Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Apni Pathshala. In the previous video, we have completed the part 1 of your first chapter from your Cbse class 9 history book, that is the French Revolution. So today we are going to start the second topic, that is the outbreak of the revolution, like how the revolution was started. Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons you have learnt in the previous sections. How do you think he could have gone about doing this? In France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the Estates General, which could then pass his proposals for new taxes. The Estates General was a political body to which the three estates sent their representatives. However, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting of this body. The last time it was done was in 1614. On May 5, 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the Estates General to pass proposals for new taxes. A resplendent hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second estates sent 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, while 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. The third estate was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. Peasants, artisans and women were denied to entry to the assembly. However, their grievances and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with them. Voting in the Estates General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each estate had one vote. This time too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice, but members of the third estate demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles put forward by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. When the king rejected these proposals, members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as spokesmen for the whole French nation. On 20th June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by Mirabeau, an ambitious. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privilege. He brought out a general and delivered powerful speeches to the crowd assembled at Versailles. You can see there that this was the picture of the tennis court oath, where we can see the oaths were taken and the whole mass of people are from third estate actually. And here is a picture of the people from three estates that they are taking oath of a meaningful government. Abicius, originally a priest, wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? You should have to remember this. What is the Third Estate, written by Abicius, who was originally a priest. While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest. The price of bread rose. Often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed into the shops. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14th July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed Bastille. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy ripe crops. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked shatiks. They looted hoarded grain and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Faced with the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his power would from now on be checked by a constitution. On the night of 14th August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. So let us understand this. So in the previous section we got to know how Louis XVI was forced and what were the main reasons for him to increase the taxes upon the third estate. In France, the old regime actually don't have the power to make all the decisions of imposing taxes all of his alone. He had to call off a meeting with the estate generals, and then he had to pass the proposals for new taxes. The estate general is actually a political body to which three estates had to send their representatives. You should remember this, that the estate general was a political body to which the three estates sent their representatives. However, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting. It is up to the monarch that when he will call the meeting, and this was lastly done in 1614. On May 5, 1789, Louis XVI again called an assembly of the Estates General to pass proposals for new taxes. The meeting was taken place in a resplendent hall in Versailles to prepare to host that was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second estates sent 300 members each, and the third estate alone has sent 600 members, and the members of the first and second estates were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, but the members sent by third estate were there stand at the back. So it was quite disrespectful for them, because they are more in number, but they have to stand because they belong to the third estate. Then the third estate was represented by most of its prosperous and educated members, and peasants, artisans and women were denied to entry to the assembly. See, the peasants and the artisans and women were actually denied the entry of they were not actually allowed to participate in the meeting of the assembly. However, their opinions, grievances and demands were there in 40,000 letters which the representatives have brought with them. Voting in the Estates General in the past was there was a rule that each estate will count one vote. Like each estate has one vote only, and this time Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice. But the members of third estate actually demanded the voting now should be considered by the assembly as a whole. Means each member of the assembly should have one vote, like the system of democracy, one nation, one people, one vote, that type. This was actually one of the democratic principles put forward by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. We have read it earlier that Rousseau was mainly known for putting forward these principles that each member should have one vote. And when the king rejected this proposal, the members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. Means you can see that from this situation, when the king rejected the proposals, the member of third estate got a got a what I will say, got a spark to start the revolution and to start the protest against the first and second estate. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as spokesperson for the whole French nation. So they viewed themselves as the spokesperson of the whole French nation. Means they will actually they actually started to tell that what kind of injustice has been taken place when they when all of their 600 members went to the assembly for discussion. On 20th June, they all assembled in the indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles, and they declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they drafted a constitution for France, which would limit the powers of the monarch. So they gathered in the tennis court, in the ground of tennis courts of Versailles, and declared themselves as a national assembly, and they will not break this till there is a constitution in France which would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by Mirabeau and Ambitious. Mirabeau was, though born in a noble family, but was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privileges. Means he was born in a noble family, but he actually never liked the feudal privileges and the perks that they get as a noble family. He brought out different kinds of journals and delivered powerful speeches to the crowds assembled at Versailles. Ambitious, who was originally a priest, wrote an influential pamphlet What is the Third Estate. So while the assembly was busy at Versailles drafting the constitution, the rest of the France was in continuous turmoil. Means the situation was getting worse day by day, as there was a severe winter that had fallen upon France at that time. So the harvest was very bad. The price of bread rose, and often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. Means for their income, bakers had to steal foods and hoarded grains from the farmers to make bread. After spending long hours in queues at the bakery, the crowds of angry women stormed into the shops. What will happen if you stand in a line for 2 to 3 hours for just a loaf of bread? Then automatically you will be very angry because of the situation. So you will actually jump in the shop and take whatever you want, and then you will you will not care about anyone, and you will do whatever you want after this kind of situation. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris, and on 14th July the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. So when the king sent troops to Paris, then on 14th July the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed Bastille. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that lords of manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy ripe crops. So the lords of manors had hired bands and brigands who were there to destroy their ripe crops. If the crops are destroyed, then no products will be available in the market, and everyone will be so tensed to not get their staple food actually. And caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts hose and pitchforks and attacked chataks. So what is a chataks? Castle or stately residence belonging to a king or a nobleman. And what is manor? Manor, an estate consisting of the lord, lord's lands and his mansion. So they looted the grains that were present in the manor's house, and they also burned down the documents where there were where the records of manorial dues were kept. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, and many of them migrated to other countries. For because in this kind of situations, the manors could only have think to flew away, because if they were present there, then the peasants would have literally murdered them and take away all their essentials from the manor's house. Faced with the power of revolting subjects, Louis XVI now finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly. So, after all of these and all of these disturbances, Louis XVI finally accorded the recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by a constitution. On night 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligation and taxes. Remember the date, on night 4th August. On night 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligation and taxes. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were confiscated. So the tithe was abolished, and the lands that were owned by the church were taken away. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Means, you just think the amount of money that it was taking up from the third estate to repay the loans was only completed when the lands that were given to the church were taken away. Means the amount of land that was given to the church was so much that they actually costed 2 billion livres. That's why the people have done the good job by protesting actually. France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. The National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. Please remember this. When was the drafting of the constitution of the National Assembly was completed? Its main object was to limit the powers of the monarch. These powers, instead of being concentrated in the hands of one person, were now separated and assigned to different institutions: the legislature, the executive, judiciary. This made France a constitutional monarchy. So the main objective was of the constitution was to limit the powers of the monarch, and these powers, instead of being concentrated in the hands of one person, they are now divided in three groups, that is the legislature, executive and judiciary. So this made France a constitutional monarchy. We all know the system of the judiciary, executive and legislature that we are reading from class 6. So in detail we will learn it when we will study political science. And okay, let's see the system that was in the France. Judiciary judge, and the vote was given by active citizens entitled to vote, about 4 million of a population of 28 million. So they also chose electors that were 50,000 men, and then vote was given to the National Assembly, that the 745 members, and the king and his ministers were in the group of executive. The National Assembly has control over king, and the king has veto power over the National Assembly. Also, the National Assembly has control over ministers, and the passive citizens had no voting rights, about 3 million men, and women, children and youth below 25. So the voting age was above 25 or above 25. The Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. That is, citizens voted for a group of electors who turn choose the assembly. Not all citizens, however, had the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage were given the status of active citizen. That is, they were entitled to vote. The remaining men and all women were classed as passive citizens. To qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. So, the Constitution of 1791 vested the powers to make laws in the National Assembly, which was actually indirectly elected. The National Assembly was not directly elected. It was actually made to make protest against the king. So that is, the citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn choose the assembly. And not all the citizens had the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who have paid taxes, which is equal to 3 days of a laborer's wage, were given the status of active citizens, and that is, they were entitled to vote. The remaining men and all women were classed as passive citizens to qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly. A man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. So you can see this is the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen that is actually painted, and the figure on the right represents France. The figure on the right means this figure represents France and this figure represents law. And here is the directorates or the Declaration of the Rights of Men. The Constitution began with the Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law were established as natural and inalienable rights. That is, they belong to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. It was a duty of the state to protect each citizen's natural rights. So, the Constitution began with the Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens, and also with the rights like right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law, and all these were natural and inalienable rights and belong to each and every human being by birth and could not be taken away. And it was a duty of the state to protect these rights for individuals or citizens living in the country. So here are some symbols. You must practice drawing this kind of symbols, because in your exams this may come, as I have also practiced some of the drawings and I have also got in exams. So, reading political symbols. The majority of men and women in the 18th century could not read or write. So, images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. The painting by Le Barbier uses many such symbols to convey the content of the Declaration of Rights. Let us try to read these symbols. The broken chain. So, the broken chain means the chains were used to fetter slaves. Means chains were used to lock up the slaves and tell them to act according to orders. And broken chain stands for the act of becoming free. The bundle of rods or fasces. One rod can be easily broken, but if there is an entire bundle, then it cannot be easily broken. So, strength lies in unity. The eye within a triangle radiating light. The all-seeing eye stands for knowledge. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. Means, the eye stands for knowledge, and the rays of the sun will actually affect the king to see what the citizens actually want in his country. Scepter, symbol of royal power. Snake biting its tail to form a ring, symbol of eternity. A ring has neither beginning nor end. So, red Phrygian cap worn by slaves upon becoming free. So, this was actually the cap that was worn by the slaves upon becoming free. Blue, white, red, the national colors of France. You can see in the flags also the blue, white, red. The winged women, personification of law. The law tablet. This is the same for all and all are equal before it. Now, France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. Here comes actually the magic, because when the constitution was drafted, you can see there was monarchy, but now the monarchy is totally abolished and France set up its own republic. Let us see. The situation in France continued to be tense during the following years. Although Louis XVI has signed the constitution, he entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Rulers of other neighboring countries too were worried by the developments in France and made plans to send troops to put down the events that had been taking place there since the summer of 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of volunteers thronged from the provinces to join the army. They saw this as a war of the people against kings and aristocracies all over Europe. Among the patriotic songs they sang was the Marseillaise, composed by the poet Roger de L'Isle. It was sung for the first time by volunteers from Marseille as they marched into Paris and so got its name. The Marseillaise is now the national anthem of the France. The Revolutionary Wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the people. While the men were away fighting at the front, women were left to cope with the tasks of earning a living and looking after their families. Large sections of the population were convinced that revolution had to be carried further, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of society. Political clubs became an important rallying point for people who wished to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of the Jacobins, which got its name from the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. Women too, who had been active throughout this period, formed their own clubs. Section 4 of this chapter will tell you more about their activities and demands. The members of the Jacobin club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of society. They included small shopkeepers, artisans such as shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, printers, as well as servants and daily wage workers. Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. A large group among the Jacobins decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by dock workers. This was to set themselves apart from the fashionable sections of society, especially nobles who wore knee breeches. It was a way of proclaiming the end of the power wielded by the wearers of knee breeches. These Jacobins came to be known as the sans-culottes, literally meaning those without knee breeches. Sans-culottes men wore in addition the red cap that symbolized liberty. Women, however, were not allowed to do so. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection of a large number of Parisians who were angered by the short supplies and high prices of food. On the morning of August 10, they stormed the palace of Tuileries, massacred the king's guard, and held the king himself as hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family. Elections were held. From now on, all men of 25 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. The newly elected assembly was called the Convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. As you know, a republic is a form of government where the people elect the government, including the head of the government. There is no hereditary monarchy. So you should have to remember this, that republic is a form of government where the people elect the government, including the head of the government. There is no hereditary monarchy. You can try and find out some other countries that are republics and investigate when and how they became so. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason. On 21st January 1793, he was executed publicly at the Place de la Concorde. The Queen Marie Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. Here the meaning of convent is given: building belonging to a community devoted to a religious life, like the church. So the situation in France was continued to be tense during the following years. Although Louis XVI signed the constitution, but he had secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Rulers of other neighboring countries also were worried about the situation of France, because they were worried like by setting example of the France, their citizens will also try to limit the powers of the king, and the king will never want to do that. So many of the countries sent troops to put down the events that were taking place in France since 1789. But before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. So the Prussia and Austrian war started before the National Assembly was voted in 1792. Thousands of volunteers thronged from the provinces to join the army. All of them were gone to fight in the war, and they saw this as a war of people against king and atrocities. So the war was between the king and the people of the country. And among the patriotic songs they sang the song that was the Marseillaise, and that was composed by poet Roger T. Ill. It was sung for the first time by the volunteers of Marshals as they marched into Paris, and so got its name. So where it got its name from Marshals as they marched into Paris. And the Revolutionary Wars brought only losses and economic difficulties. Literally, the wars are actually fought, but they bring a lot of losses and economic difficulties, and many people actually lose their lives also. So while men were fighting at the front, but women were left to cope up of the tasks of living and earning and looking after their families. Large section of the population were convinced that the revolution had to carry it forward, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights onto richer sections of the society. So the political rights that were given to the richer section of the society according to Constitution of 1791, the people thought the revolution must be carried forward because of this reason. So political clubs became an important rallying point for people who wish to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of actions to be taken against the government. The most successful club was that of the Jacobins, who got its name after the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. Women too were very active throughout these periods and formed their own clubs. We will get to know more about clubs in section 4. The members of the Jacobin club mainly belong to the less prosperous sections of the society, which consist of small shopkeepers, artisans such as shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, printers, as well as servants and daily wage workers. Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. So, who was their leader? Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. And you have to remember that what was the means what means what kind of people were there in the Jacobin club. A large group of people among the Jacobins decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by dock workers. This was set themselves apart from the fashionable sections of the society, especially the nobles who wore knee breeches. So it was a sign for them to proclaim the end of the power wielded by the wearers of knee breeches, that is the richer sections of the society. These Jacobins came to be known as the sans-culottes. So what were the Jacobins came to be known as sans-culottes? Literally meaning those without knee breeches. Sans-culottes men wore in addition, they also wore in addition a red cap that symbolized liberty. We have discussed in the symbols that red Phrygian cup that was worn by the people to declare themselves as free. So that red cap is this. Women were, however, not allowed to do so. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection of a large number of Persians who angered by the short supplies and high prices of the food. So the Jacobins decided to do an insurrection against the large number of Persians who angered by the short supplies and high prices of the food. On morning August 10, they stormed the place of Tuileries and massacred the king guards and held the king himself as a hostage for several hours. So they captured the king and let him become a hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family and elections were held. From then on, the men of 21 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. And the newly elected assembly was called the Convention. What was the newly elected assembly called? The Convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. So, as we all know that republic is a form of government where people elect the government including the head of the government, and there is actually no hereditary monarchy. And after that, Louis XVI was sentenced to death by the court on the charge of treason. And on 21st January, he was executed publicly at the Place de la Concorde. His wife Marie Antoinette was met with the same fate also. The Reign of Terror is a very important part. Okay, the Reign of Terror is very important for your exam. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as the Reign of Terror. So the period from 1793 to 1794 was referred to as Reign of Terror. Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. All those whom he saw as being enemies of the Republic, ex-nobles and clergy, member of other political parties, even member of his own party who did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, they were guillotined. The guillotine is a device consisting of two poles and a blade with which a person is beheaded. It was named after Dr. Guillotine, who invented it. Robespierre's government issues laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. Meat and bread were rationed Peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it at prices fixed by the government. The use of more expensive white flour was forbidden. All citizens were required to eat the pain d'elite. Remember this? What is pain d'elite? Equality bread, a loaf made of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to be practiced through forms of speech and address. Instead of traditional monsieur and madame, all French men and women were henceforth citoyen and citoyenne. Churches shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that even his supporters began to demand moderation. Finally, he was convicted by a court in July 1794, arrested on the next day, and sent to guillotine. So, after the execution of Louis XVI, the whole control was given onto the hands of Robespierre, and during his reign from 1793 to 1794, that period is known as Reign of Terror. Means the people were so much in terror and distress that the period has come to know as the Reign of Terror. Robespierre followed the policy of severe control and punishment. Like the men who were his enemy, that are the ex-nobles, clergy and members of other political parties, even his own party members who don't agree with his methods, were actually arrested, imprisoned and tried by revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, then they were guillotined. Guillotine is a device that consists of a pole and a blade with which a person is beheaded, and it was named after Dr. Guillotin, who invented it. Robespierre's government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. So meat and bread were rationed. Means all the foods and wages and prices were actually fixed by Robespierre's government. Means they will fix the price whether it is low or high, not the workers or their work. Peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it at the fixed price of the government. The use of more expensive white flour was forbidden, and all citizens were ordered to eat the pain d'elite, that is the equality bread, a loaf made of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to practice through forms of speech and address. Like in earlier France, the men were called monsieur and the women were called madame, and now all French men and women will henceforth be called as citoyen and citoyenne. Churches were shut down and they were converted into barracks or offices. So Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that his supporters also demanded moderation in his government. Finally, he was convicted by a court in July 1794. Remember the date? 1794, and arrested, and on the next day he was sent to guillotine. This is the revolutionary government sought to mobilize the loyalty of its subjects through various means. One of them was staging festivals like this one. Symbols from civilization of ancient Greece and Rome were used to convey the aura of hallowed history. The pavilion on the raised platform in the middle, carried by the classical columns, was made of perishable material that would be dismantled. Now, Directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote of non-property sections of the society. It provided for 2 elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the Directory paved the way for the rise of the military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. Though all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of freedom, of equality before the law, and of fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and the rest of Europe during the following century. So, the fall of Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize powers, and a new constitution was introduced which denied the vote of non-property sections of the society, and it provided for two legislative assemblies. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members, and this was made as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. So the people thought that if they introduce a directory the directory and executive of 5 members among the country, then the power will not be in the hands of a person, then it will get divided among 5 members. So this was actually to safeguard the country against the concentration of power within one-man executive. So the directors, obviously clashes will happen because there are 5 executives, so the clashes will often happen. So the directors often clash with the legislative council and who sought to dismiss them. Yes, the legislative council will definitely dismiss them if these kind of clashes happen day by day, and the political instability of the directory actually paved the given the way to rise for a military dictator, that is Napoleon Bonaparte. We will read about him in the last section, but remember his name only. So through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of freedom, of equality before the law and fraternity remained inspiring ideals, and by this they motivated many political movements in France and the rest of the Europe through the following centuries. So with this kind of ideas, many revolutions were set up through the rest of the Europe, that was started from France, and people get to know more about freedom, equality before law and fraternity among themselves, and they also started to make their own rights safe and to sort their opportunities and many other demands for to the government. So in this way we have completed the part 2 and 3 of this chapter. I hope you all have understood this up to this, and if you have any doubt or any problem, you can ask me in the comment section or you can mail me in my personal mail. So till then, I hope there is no problem. So I will again come tomorrow with the part 4, 5 and 6, and I will complete this chapter tomorrow. So let it end here. Thank you. Bye.